Hey guys, we have this one of these brand new Piaggio Typhoon 50s in the shop today with the new Euro 4 emissions control. So there's been a few changes to these that are going to change things from a tuning perspective. So I'm just going to discuss through a few of the part changes first, and then we'll go through what those changes are going to mean and what those parts do. So first of all, different CDI. This is actually closer to an ECU than it is a CDI. So some of the parts that have accompanied this change, obviously they've separated it to the different coil now, as opposed to the coil CDI setup that Piaggio have been using for a number of years, which is a joined all-in-one unit. Another one of the changes is a temperature sensor on the heads. This one's just been disconnected at the moment. The other changes, this is where things start to get a little bit more complex, so I'll try and break it down as simply as possible. Just pop that in there for the time being. So this system here, this little part here has a little strainer there. That's a tiny little air filter. That line comes around to here and comes up onto this little tube here. So that's just an air supply for this tube. Now, to control the air supply in that tube is this little solenoid. So as a scooter's riding, the ECU has the ability to open and close this little solenoid. So the effect that has, when the solenoid's in the retracted position, it blocks the air off here. When it comes in like that, it allows this the air coming through here to flow down this line. So where's that air going? All right, follow this line down. We've removed the carby for the time being, just to show you, but I'll show you where on the carb this air is going. Okay, so this is our factory carb here. One of the little things you'll notice that's different with this carb as opposed to the older models is this temperature sensor here, which just supplies additional information to the ECU. So I'll pop our bowl off, sort of pre-loosen a couple of these parts up so we can show you. So we've got our idle or our pilot jet there and main jet here. So where that little air tube is going to is this little line here. So the easiest way to sort of show you where that air is going, because there's lots of little nooks and crannies in the carb, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look around this way. It's going to spray a little bit of fluid into this little port, and we'll see where it essentially comes out of. So you'll see straight away it's coming out of the main jet and this little breather here. Now, jets on a carb, they have to have a breather. Same as a fuel tank. For fluid to be able to flow in and out of them, they must have a breather. So, essentially what this is doing, fuel and air inside a carb work sort of similarly to electricity. The path that it'll always follow the path of least resistance. So an air is generally easier to suck inside a carb than fluid. So what this is doing is essentially, as that little solenoid opens up, it's supplying air to free-flowing air to the main jet breather, which is meaning essentially it's leaning the bike out. It's meaning that instead of sucking the full amount of fuel that it would from the main jet, it's sucking air accompanied with fuel. So you may be thinking, why would it do that? Why would you want your main jet sucking air instead of fuel? Essentially, the idea behind this is it leans the bike out at certain times, depending on the temperature of the engine, which it measures by this temperature sensor here and the temperature sensor on the head, as well as by the RPM of the engine at the time. So depending on the RPM and the temperature of the bike, the ECU will allow that little solenoid to open up and supply additional air to the carb, which will lean out the tune. What this does is it means that the bike's using less fuel to help it comply with ridiculously strict Euro 4 emissions, which is the same reason that a lot of two-strokes are becoming four-strokes, or they're moving to systems like this because of very, very strict emissions control. Okay, so just to put it all into sort of a real-life scenario, because it can be a little bit difficult when it's just looking at a bunch of separate parts. So here we are on the left-hand side of the bike, got our carby reinstalled. This here is that little temperature sensor, and that there is that little air line coming up to the little air supply fuel system and the solenoid. So what we're going to do, I'm going to get one of the boys here to turn the bike over, and I pull this solenoid out, and I'll show you. So there it is there, opening and closing. So Ray, if you just want to crank it over. There it is, you see it's opening and closing, allowing more fuel in. So I'd say that little rapid in and out is something associated with starting. I'd say it probably isn't doing that the entire time, but it is certainly going in and out during different times through the rev range. With this system, essentially the only reason this system exists is because of extremely strict Euro 4 emissions control. Isn't necessary or beneficial to the running of the scooter, not really at all. And it significantly increases the likelihood of having a seizure. Mainly just due to the fact that you can't control when this system is going to lean the scooter out, which is frustrating from a tuning perspective. So if you're like us, the first thing you're going to be thinking is, okay, how can I disengage this? Because it's not necessary and I want to get rid of it. Well, there's a couple of ways you can do this. First way is you can block this tube. Blocking this tube means that the air coming from here can't get into the carb and it can't lean the carby out. Second way of doing it, which to be honest is the way that we would preference. If we come around to the other side to the CDI ECU unit, so this wire here, this black and white wire, by cutting or removing this wire from the plug, it disengages that little solenoid and it can't work anymore. From our perspective, we think that pulling it out of the plug so that it can be replaced at a later stage if you so choose is probably the better call than chopping it. We usually don't recommend just chopping into wires, just generally speaking, with pretty much anything. So if you pull it out of the plug, later on it can be replaced. Look, why would you want to replace it later on? Well, you might go and buy the Molossi Digitronic CDI unit, and it actually, so we've seen so far without actually trying it, it does have some beneficial ways of using that extra little system. So by popping the plug, that little wire out of the plug, you can replace it later on if you choose to. And if nothing else, it'd certainly be interesting to see what difference it makes with the Molossi Digitronic unit. If you cut the wire, it's going to be a real pain to reconnect it later on. So that's that system there. It's certainly making tuning a lot more difficult with these scooters. But as you know, with everything with the tuning community, every time a manufacturer comes out with some new system, Molossi are really onto it with coming up with ways of getting around it and still getting the best out of the engine. So hopefully that's been helpful to you, and you can still have the confidence to tune up your SRMT or Typhoon 50. As I mentioned, this is with the Euro 4 model only, which is pretty much from 2018 onwards in Australia. So before you go ordering anything, definitely recommend that you have a look first, just to make sure that you've got this new system or you don't. Really easy way of doing that is just removing the plug or the engine inspection cover, which is immediately behind your heels if you're sitting on the scooter. If your coil looks like this, it means that you have the new system, unfortunately. But yeah, hopefully we've given you enough confidence to go ahead and disengage that system, and at the very least you understand a little bit more about it. So if you're going to be doing some tuning, you can get the best out of your scooter.